Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Zombie Train. This is episode number 284, and I'm your host, Ellis, otherwise known as Train Man. I apologize if the video looks weird. It might be the fact that I had to speed this up, but it hasn't done this before, so I don't know how it's going to come out. And, again, I apologize if it looks weird. The under construction seems to have come out fine, so it might just be this. I don't know. Anyway, this episode, I have a list of engines that was given to me by KS1 Productions, or formerly Southern Railroad 630 and 4501 Rock. That's a long name. Neither of them are Southern Railroad 630 or 4501. And I'm really going to have to pull the history books out for this one because I don't recognize, like, any of these numbers. So the first one on the list is Southern 1508. So let's see. Let's see what I can pull up for this one. I'm not seeing it. Southern Railroad 1508. Is this it? No. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that locomotive. Okay, well, how about the next one? 1609. Southern Railroad 1609. No? How come, what is this? What is this? How come I'm not finding this engine? 903. That's not even a... What are these engines? 154? 154. Oh, okay. This guy. These guys were on the Three Rivers Ramble. Okay. 154 and 203. 203 is another engine in there. These were fun little engines. I didn't know about the Three Rivers Rambler until we started, going out and really looking at, looking at other little engines we could get our hands on, or just engines that were operating that we didn't know about, and it was a relatively recently restored locomotive, because the Three Rivers Rambler, as far as I understand, was not, when did they start operating? Because as far as I understood, they were relatively new on the scene. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'd never heard of them before. But yeah, 154 is a Connie. 203 is another Connie. They were both Connies, that's right. We tended to use them together because we could get our hands on them. Although 203, if I recall correctly, wasn't running when we got there. Maybe it was just going down for an inspection or something. It didn't, if I recall correctly, it hadn't been taken apart, but it was not operating, or, it hadn't been previously operating. The only issue with these engines is that the only issue with these engines was their location. And being in Knoxville was really a no-go zone. We went through there once. We had gone through there once, and it was not good. And there was another engine there. There was a smaller engine there. I think it was 60. It was a little, like, it was a modern American, I think. And it was not running. It was in kind of rough shape, honestly. It looked like it hadn't been run in a while, but we did get to working on those. This was one of those sort of smash and grab smash and grab operations where we went in there with a very, very small crew, fired up the engine, fired up one of the engines, we fired up 154, and we dragged 203 and 60, which we didn't know about, and we just basically discovered. We grabbed them and we got the hell out of Dodge, because not only was the area, pretty dangerous just in terms of zombies and stuff like that, but I recall there being some groups that didn't want us in there. Just some people that didn't want us in there. I don't know. And I mentioned that it was a little bit later when we were looking for other operable engines, but I don't know. I don't know. So those engines, they were good. We took them out of their home turf. We sent them elsewhere. I don't really remember, but we sent them elsewhere and they stuck together. Those were some of these engines that they started out as a group and they didn't leave that group. They, they were, bound to one another because they were both very small. They were all very small, and I think 60 ended up being used elsewhere, but 203 and 154 stayed together. And so, yeah, that was what happened with them. What other locomotives are on this list? So 107. So let's look at that one. What is that one? Southern Railroad 107. 107 locomotive. Oh, this guy. I don't know what we did with this. Where is this? This is yeah, that was on display. This thing was on display, and it had been on display for a long, long time. This engine was in rough shape, having been outside, and it was one of the ones where we, if I recall correctly, it isn't even on a piece of track that connects to anything. It was just sort of up on a berm, and getting it off of there was kind of a disaster, because we didn't really have a truck, so we tried to build temporary track and roll it. It didn't want to roll. The tender ended up off the tracks, like off the embankment. It also was missing a lot of parts. We didn't know where to get any extra parts for it, because it was a kind of unique looking engine. It was a Baldwin engine, but we didn't identify it as, what it ended up being, which we realized that it was an ex-Southern engine, but we just didn't know of its origins. Because it's sort of a, what's the word? It was a loaner. It was, a Southern railway engine that worked on a different railway and then merged into another one, and then, it was, I don't know, it was sort of out there. It was not the easiest engine to get our hands on, not the easiest engine to restore, just because we weren't quite sure what we were looking at. I was never an expert in these smaller locomotives, and, we did sort of get it, or we did get it running eventually, but it took way more time than a locomotive of its size should have taken, and I don't know. It was a cluster, because we ended up banging that engine up. I honestly felt bad for it, but at the same time I was kind of frustrated because it felt like a massive waste of time. It wasn't a very large or powerful engine. It's just another small consolidation, and yeah, there were a lot of consolidations, and so, they became very useful engines for us of, those mid-size engines. but it was not as powerful as, you'd hope for a Connie. But, okay, what else is on this list? I don't want to run out of time. 722. What is this engine? 722. It's kind of an awkward way to do things. Oops, that's not the right thing. 722. Okay. 722 is where? Was where? Great Smoky Mountains. Not assembled. It was, that's right. It was in Dillsboro, in North Carolina, it was with the S-160. Oh man. So, the thing with the S-160 and with 722 is the fact that they took all their parts, and they put them, aside, and then I'm not totally sure what happened to the building that they put them in, but it was in really bad shape, and I don't know if there were. I'm going to assume the best of them and assume that they did label things, and then the labels came off, or something, but we did not know what we were looking at. I didn't know, what parts were for what engine, so it ended up, becoming a lot like the last engine I just talked about, where it was, how do we fix this? We don't even know what we're looking at. The S-160 was easy enough because that's, it's a U.S. Army design that ended up being fairly ubiquitous, and we had another example to look at, but 722 was like, well, now what? It's 722 is, we're looking at this engine, and it's come apart, and it really didn't look like they were trying to get it back together, so, this was one of the engines. Great Smoky Mountains is a great operation, or was a great operation, and it seemed like it'd be a great opportunity to get some good steam engines, but it ended up just being kind of perplexing. And so we'll look at the other questions. I think are the Great Smoky Mountains 1702 and SNA 750. I don't know SNA 750 off the top of my head, but let's see. 1702. Yeah, that's the S-160, right? Is it? Two steam locomotive. Yeah, that's 1702. Also, I had heard about Great Smoky Mountains, and I've been like, oh, that's probably a really useful place to get locomotives. Get there, did not help us. It just confused us. And the last engine on the list is SNA 750. Now, I said I don't recognize it, but I kind of do. SNA 750. So, Savannah and Atlanta. This engine was running, if I recall correctly, right? No, maybe I'm thinking of a different Pacific. On display in Duluth, Georgia. Okay. In pretty good shape, though. Maybe that's why I'm confusing it, because there definitely didn't seem to be a whole lot wrong with the locomotive. It had just sort of reached its expiration date, and then went, okay, we're done with it. It did have an excursion career, so it had been updated a little bit, a little bit of modern, tweaks, electronics, radio, that sort of thing. I'm not sure if those were things that were used during excursion career, or things that people had started to add in preparation for something else. There were definitely the remnants of that kind of stuff. It's not like we went in there and flipped a switch and had a radio. It was like, oh, this, without knowing, I could tell that there was an excursion career there, and that always gets me hopeful, but it always gets me a little bit wary, too. Because it's, okay, they restored this engine for use after the steam era, so it's been restored recently, or it's been run recently, relatively speaking. But at the same time, they might have run it into the ground. You might have an engine that was very useful for the railroad that used it for excursion service, but they totally, they burned all the rest of the life out of it, and we had our work cut out for us. This engine, as far as I recall, wasn't that engine. It wasn't like that. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next week. Trainman out.